Let me show you something about eggs. Did you know an egg is a half circle? An egg is an exactly half circle. The bottom of the egg is a perfect half circle. Now, if you wanted to draw a perfect egg, here's how it works. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 pivot points on an egg to draw a perfect egg. The first pivot point is in a line from one side of the egg to the other. So if you're having a 2-inch egg, 1 inch in the center is your pivot point. You take a compass and you draw that half circle. That's the bottom of the egg. It's perfect. That's a perfect egg. Eggs aren't perfect though. Okay? The second pivot point is here. You put the point of your compass here and the pin of your compass here. And that's your second pivot point. But before you do that, you draw a 45-degree angle. Now I'm just going to guess at this. I don't have anything this big. Just say that's 45. And let's just say that's 45. It's just a guess. It's not perfect. So this tells me where to quit drawing this angle. So I put my pivot point here and my pencil over here, and I go something like that. Something like that. And I stop at this line. My next pivot point is here. I put my compass here, and I start here. And I draw from here over to here. And it goes something like this. There's the egg. And it's perfect. That's a perfect egg. The problem is, eggs aren't perfect. Some of them have a longer point. Some of them have a shorter point. So anything in between there is just fine. So if you learn those pivot points, you can tell what an egg looks like. Or what an egg should look like. Okay, what I've done is I've created a smaller jig. I don't want my eggs to be the same size as the other one, so I made a smaller jig. That's all there is to it, just a smaller jig. And I've got some egg jigs. I mark them with an E. Imagine that. And I create an egg look. So I've got something to actually visualize, to look for. Because as you get older, you can't see as good. You think you got everything just right, and boy, you put this up there and say, oh man, what did I do? Well, that's what I do. So for this, I've got a piece of curly maple. This curly maple is, I think this is big leaf maple from California. It really doesn't matter, you can get it other places, but I've got other pieces. Here's a piece of black walnut. Here's a piece of cherry burl. I save all these pieces off these ends. If you look in my box over here, I've got all kinds of wood, different kinds. Here's old spalted apple wood that I had. Here's another piece of that cherry. Cherry's a good wood because it's close grained and it doesn't tear out as easily. It's a good, safe wood to start with, in other words. Now with an egg, you're going to do it exactly the same way that you would with a sphere. You start out that way anyway. Start out exactly the same way. You're going to go between points. And like I say, there's jigs out there that you can buy that'll fit in your tailstock. And you bring it up to the center, and it's got a little metal piece that has a cutter in it. But the cutter is a scraper. And so it scrapes a perfect circle. You just walk it around and it creates this perfect circle. But because it's a scraper, you got to do a lot of sanding on this thing. And so because wood, if you look at a piece of wood, in between these rings, it's soft. Where the rings are, it's hard. So as you're sanding, you're creating this. So if you got to do a lot of sanding, that's what you're going to get, a lot of this. And the coarser the wood, the more ripples you're going to have. And that's just a natural thing with wood. So you want to do more cutting than scraping, especially on these small things, because, boy, on a small thing, that scraping really shows up heavily. Now this kind of wood, this curly maple, big leaf maple from California, because it's real dry, and it's probably got some wormholes or something in it, it tears out real easily. So now if you can see, I left the curl here. So the side grain is here, or I mean the end grain is running this way, and the side grain is over here on the sides. So I've got it just the opposite the way I had the other one. Now I'm just going to round this a little bit. Let's see what speed I got. 2800. This kind of wood is very difficult to get a, yes. This is 2800. I could slow it down. Turn it to the speed that you feel comfortable. It'll do just as well at 1800.
They cut the little fast over at 0.3
Shear cutting,
yeah.
Better. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm doing a little bit of shear cutting. And all I'm doing is just rounding this piece off. And now I'm going to take my egg jig, and you see I've got a couple of egg jigs, and I'm going to check the width of this thing. You see it's a little bit bigger, but now here again, there's the length of my egg. Oh, wait a minute, here's the length of my egg. What am I doing? The length of my egg. So I'm going to make a mark there and do the same thing I did before. I'm going to cut a little tenon on each end. And I want the short one to be on this end because it has to fit into my jig. So I'm just going to make a mark here, say about right here. I'm going to lay my jig up there because that's about the length of my egg that I want it to be. Make my other mark over here. And remember, when I do this, it's going to actually push me out a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit longer, which isn't going to matter because remember, eggs aren't perfect. So that end can be a little bit longer. So now all I'm going to do is just draw that line on there so I know where to go. And there's where my tenons are, and there's my egg shape. I'll take my large bowl gouge. No, not yet. I don't want to do that. I better take the tenons on there first. I'm getting ahead of myself. Remember on this end, it's going to vibrate. It's vibration with a scraper. You can cut this off with a bowl gouge. You don't have to use this, but it's better to use this. You can cut it off with a bowl gouge simply by coming at the end like this. See, and that cuts. The other one does scraping. Now the reason why I show the Boudan or the parting tool, you can use a parting tool to do this also, is because most people are comfortable with a parting tool. Because that's something you just push in, right? And it's kind of a scraper, but just to let you know, you can do it with a bowl gouge also, or even a spindle gouge. Now there's approximately the length of my egg. Now I'm going to take the corner off this end. I can do that ahead of time, even though I haven't got the width of my egg yet, because I didn't have far to go. It wasn't that far. So now I can take the rest down. If you didn't want to use your bowl gouge, if you feel more comfortable with a roughing gouge, you do the same thing. But because this is end grain, you're not going to get much to cut off, because that end grain doesn't, if you could get into it, it would be better. But because you only want to take a little bit off, no matter what you use, it's only going to take a small amount off. See what's happening? No matter how hard you push on that, you're only going to get a small amount off. Now if you were cutting it the other way around, that would go much faster. Okay, there's the width of my egg. And I've already got the end cut off, so now I'm going to cut that bottom half circle. This part. Just like I did with the sphere, because that's all an egg is a half a sphere. Roll it around, just like before. Move up a little farther, take a little bite. Most eggs don't look like eggs because of that bottom part doesn't look right. A lot of people mess that up. They don't realize that that is a half a sphere. There's the bottom of the egg. Now then, for the top, we need to cut this radius. And there's only a slight arc there. There's not much. So I can start on the other end and just draw it back. I could start on the end and take until I get it. So you see I'm using that tip and I'm cutting. That very tip. I'm just laying that tip up there. I'm riding against the bevel and then I'm just pushing it along. So I get that nice angle on it. So now I come up here, I'm going to shear this back a little bit. Blend it in. Roll this around. Blend it in a little bit. You can look at it, or you can take a jig, lay it up there to see, okay, how much of that, did I get that all right? And you just pull it up to that edge, and you can tell. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm going to give it a little bit more on the end. I'm going to roll it up just a little bit more. Okay, there's 2/3 of the egg. I've got this part and I've got this part. I'm probably about up to here on that part, so I can go up a little bit farther. But instead of doing that, I'm going to start rounding off this end. And the reason why is because I know that's the end of my egg. So if I start cutting that now, I get it part way, then I can come back here and start cutting. And I can kind of follow that line. And all that is up on that end is just a small circle, just a very small circle. That's basically the shape of the egg. If I don't like the looks of it, if I want to take this down a little bit, I can come back here and roll that in, blend it in. If I don't like the looks of this end, I can come back here and blend it in. But basically, there's the shape of your egg. And you'll get it every time if you follow this diagram. All you're doing is you're looking at 3 different steps. Step 1, step 2, step 3. That's in the basic turning of the egg. And of course, after that, right now, I would come back and sand this, because what happens is out here on this part, not here, but on this part, I get tear out. So I get a little bit of tear out there. Very difficult to get rid of. You need to really shave that down. So I usually leave my egg a little bit wider right in here, because this outside part turns faster than the inside part. So if you just hold your sandpaper there a little bit, you get rid of that tear out. So that's what I would do right now. I'm just going to take my 120 grit and I'm just going to walk along here. I'm going to get rid of any tool marks, any little facets, and get rid of the tear out. And I'm going to stop every once in a while and look to see if I'm getting rid of that tear out, especially on this kind of wood. This is very kind of hard wood to to create a sphere or an egg out of. Okay, now that I've got it this far, if I wanted to decorate the egg, well, I guess I don't have one here. Oh yeah, I got, no, I don't. I don't have an egg that I don't have one left. I guess I sell stuff. I guess. Well, anyway, if I was going to do that, I would put my lines in it right now. If I was going to make the little squares, I would do that right now.
Ron?
Yes.
Question. When you started that, you had a nice round blank, about 2 inches, 2.5 inches.
Yep.
How are you making those blanks?
I start out with a piece like this, and I mark the center. I put it in here. Would you like to see me round one?
No, I
Okay.
understand what you're doing now.
It's just very simple.
Yep.
I just had these pre-rounded. That one that I started in the beginning, somewhere out there, that little red one, is that was square when I started, and I just rounded it. That's all it is. Let's see, I need to go to the next step. Same way with the egg, exactly like the jig for the spheres. The only difference is we're doing an egg. So I need to put my chuck back on. And this is still the same process. So it's just repetition. If I was going to do this, if you were at home and you had 30 pieces of apple, say, you had 30 pieces of apple, and you wanted to turn 30 spheres, then you do the round part in the middle first and leave the tenons on and put it aside. Turn the next one, put it aside with the tenons on. Get all 30 of them turned with the tenons still on, and then go to the next step. Put it in your jig, take off the end. Put it in your jig, take off the end. Otherwise, if you just do one at a time, you're going to be switching these things back and forth, and it's very time consuming. That's why if anybody that does any of this, this one came from a different chuck. I think I've got the chuck here, but I'll use this one. Let's just see how centered it is. Whoa, how could it be so perfect? And this came from a different chuck, so it should be okay. It's round. Well, anyway, we're going to do the same thing. We've got our jig. I'm going to turn the bottom part of this thing first. And this egg is a little bit bigger. It's quite a bit bigger than this. So obviously I used the wrong egg mold. Yes, I did. I've got another jig at home that I do this with. So I'm not going to be able to do this because this is too big unless I go back and round it. You want me to go smaller? Okay.